We acknowledge the island of Dahumguk as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and Mi'kmaq people. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Walal and Toli Marie. Gwe, on behalf of our members and the Chief and Council of the Halibu Mi'kmaq First Nation, I want to welcome you to the Central Region and to the community of Gander, which is located in our Glenwood ward. We are deeply honored to be here today to show our respect to those who lost their lives in the tragic events of September the 11th, 2001. That day will be forever ingrained in our hearts, and we will always remember the lives needlessly lost, the contributions of first responders, and the lifelong friendships that were forged. As we know, the people of Gander, Glenwood, Appleton, and others played an important role on 9/11 and the days that followed by supporting individuals impacted by air travel. It was a demonstration of pure kindness, selflessness, and a genuine concern for humankind. We honor those contributions as well. Welcome to our traditional lands, Walalio.
Good afternoon. My name is Toni Marie Wiseman, and it is my utmost honor to be your MC today. For those of you joining us via the live broadcast and on our social media channels, welcome. We gather today on this, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, to remember the lives tragically taken, the first responders who valiantly ran into danger, and the acts of kindness and compassion performed right here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We've entitled our commemoration, "The Power of Many," a fitting motto, as it did take many hands to help feed, clothe, and house the over 6,500 passengers that landed here in Gander that day. We, along with the entire world, watched in horror as we saw the face of terror attacking our neighbors in the United States. Little did we know the role that Gander, Appleton, Glenwood, Gambo, Lewisport, Norris Arm, and many other communities throughout our great country would play on this tragic day. When hatred sought to destroy our way of life, we were given the opportunity to show that love, compassion, and generosity will always prevail over evil. Join me now as we begin our service with the March on Flags and Parade of First Responders led by the Royal Newfoundland Regiment Band and Parade Commander Captain Vincent Labonte. And we ask that you please remain standing as George Maswal sings the national anthems of the United States and Canada.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true North strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
You may be seated. Thank you, George. As we reflect on the past 20 years since that devastating day, let us take a few moments to quiet our hearts. The ritual of lighting a candle can mean many things. It symbolizes remembrance of the fire a loved one brought into our life. It can center us in times of adversity and bring us comfort and hope. Today, we will light 3 lanterns in an act of remembrance and tribute. As we light the first lantern, we remember the nearly 3,000 lives taken from us so cruelly. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, wives, husbands, and close friends who tragically lost their lives at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. As the second lantern is lit, we remember the courage and sacrifice of the brave first responders who, despite the destruction and debris, raced up the steps of the collapsing towers to rescue survivors and care for the injured. We remember the unsung heroes, the ordinary citizens who risked their own lives to help and save countless co-workers and strangers. We honor the hundreds of thousands of first responders and survivors, workers and residents who on that day of the attacks throughout the recovery of the World Trade Center were exposed to hazards and toxins in the air leading to their injury, sickness, and death. With this lantern, we also pay tribute to the men and women of our armed forces who valiantly give of themselves every day to protect the rights and freedoms we enjoy. Lastly, the third lantern commemorates the kindness and compassion shown by the residents of Newfoundland and Labrador, who generously opened their hearts and homes to the over 17,000 plain people who landed in our province. Tired and shocked and weary, passengers and crew were welcomed with a shoulder to cry on, a place to lay their head, and of course, in the traditional Newfoundland way, lots of food on the table. This true testament to the generosity of the spirit shown by our province still resonates across the world today. As we watch these three lanterns glowing, let us do so with gratitude. Gratitude for the lives lost, the courage and sacrifice given, and the compassion shown. Before I pray, I would like to read a poem entitled "Remember Me" by Margaret Mead. To the living, I am gone. To the sorrowful, I will never return. To the angry, I was cheated. But to the happy, I am at peace. And to the faithful, I have never left. I cannot speak, but I can listen. I cannot be seen, but I can be heard. So as you stand upon a shore, gazing into a beautiful sea, as you look upon a flower and admire its simplicity, remember me. Remember me in your heart, your thoughts, and your memories of the times we loved, the times we cried, the times we fought, the times we laughed. For if you always think of me, I will never have gone. Let us pray. Dear God, as we are gathered here today to reflect and remember, we pray that you, the God of all comfort and compassion, will be with us. May we experience your peace, for your holy word reminds us in Psalm 46 that you are our refuge and strength and a very present help in time of trouble. We find refuge in you today, as we have in the past, and we will continue to trust you for the future. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Major Rex Colburn, for performing this touching ceremony for us on behalf of the Gander Ministerial Association. Our next performer, Robin Slade, is a 19-year-old from Gander who at just 14 made her mark in the music industry with her original song, I Know Who She Is, telling an emotional love story of an elderly man visiting his wife with dementia in a nursing home. The song snowballed overnight on social media, touching the lives of thousands worldwide, and trended at number 36 on YouTube. Robin is here today to perform Hero's Heart, a tribute to first responders.
Thank you very much, Tony Marie. I'm very honored to be here today to sing my original song, Hero's Heart, as a tribute to all the first responders. In the middle of the storm is where you find them, charging in when everyone is running down. They make that choice
Thank you very much, Robin. Wow. Can you believe she's just 19 years old? We want to say thank you very much to Robin for sharing her beautiful song with us today. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, the Federal Aviation Administration closed U.S. airspace, and Canada commenced Operation Yellow Ribbon to handle the diversion of civilian airline flights. Gander International Airport, which was the first North American airport on the transatlantic route, took in 38 wide-body aircraft, mostly heading for U.S. destinations. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Mayor Percy Farwell to bring greetings to you today.
Thank you, Tony Marie. And Robin's a tough act to follow. Your Honours, distinguished stage guests, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen that have been so kind to join us here today in person in the Steele Community Centre and wherever you may be via the various media platforms. Welcome to all of you. Special welcome to those who've travelled a long way to be with us here today. And thank you all for being here for this time of remembrance and reflection with us. Today, we remember events that altered our world, how we see it and how we interact in it. And for us here in Gander and around Newfoundland and Labrador and across Canada, we reflect on a twist of fate that left us intimately and profoundly linked to this story. So this is a day of reflection and remembrance, first and foremost, of those nearly 3,000 innocent souls who died in New York, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., and those who've died or continued to suffer in the years following. And it's a day of consolation and a message of love and support to those who lost loved ones. It's a day of tribute to those heroes who responded on that day and who continue to respond around the world, sacrificing their own safety to protect others. And for us, it's a day of gratitude, that in that dark time, we were blessed with the opportunity to care for real people affected by these events, who literally dropped out of the sky here and at other Canadian airports in a distressed state and in need of the most fundamental human requirements: food, shelter, clothing, and most importantly, consolation, reassurance, and love. Now, residents of our country, our province, and particularly those in Gander and area, have received great accolades for support provided to these distressed travelers. And although our people were not seeking praise or reward and acted solely out of an instinct to treat others as they would have others treat them in similar circumstances, we do appreciate it. But our primary reward was found in the faces of those we helped, and the bonds formed as a result. And our reward is ongoing, as the retelling of the story of what happened here continues to provide reassurance, hope, and inspiration to a world that desperately needs it. I cannot tell you how rewarding it is to receive bundles of handwritten letters from high school students in California, in Texas, Toronto, and to name a few, or to be asked to speak to a class of sixth graders in Missouri. All young people who were not born on September 11th, 2001, but who are learning important lessons in the value of human kindness as the story of what happened here is being discussed in their respective classrooms. This is what matters. So today is also a reflection on ourselves, on how we live our lives and how we treat our fellow humans. This is a day of acknowledgement that darkness is overcome only by light and hatred only by love. And it's a reminder to all of us to be that light and to share that love. And as we contemplate the state of affairs around the world today, whether the circumstances of the people in Afghanistan or the plight of the disadvantaged living among us, we are reminded that the need for putting values in action is ongoing. Ladies and gentlemen, we deeply regret the circumstances under which fate has connected our community with our neighbors around the world, and in particular in the United States, on this occasion and others, such as the Arrow Air tragedy of 1985, where 256 U.S. citizens perished literally on our doorstep. But we treasure the relationship we share as a result. We cherish the bonds formed in the midst of tragedy and despair, and we hope we are the friend that former U.S. soldier and President Ulysses S. Grant referred to when he said, "The friend in my adversity I shall always cherish most. I can better trust those who helped to relieve the gloom of my dark hours than those who are so ready to enjoy with me the sunshine of my prosperity." So as we gather here today to remember those who died, to support those who knew and loved them, and pay tribute to those true heroes who selflessly rushed to their assistance, let us not forget our own obligations to each other and the power we each have to truly make a difference. Let us give thanks for the bonds of friendship formed and strengthened by meeting those obligations in times of crisis and despair. And let us unite in a wish for comfort to those who remember this day with sadness, hope for those who remember this day with despair, and tolerance and peace for those who remember it with anger. And let us never, ever forget September 11th, 2001. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Mayor Farwell. When the town of Gander was told it would be receiving 38 planes carrying over 6,500 passengers, it didn't take long for organizers to realize that we would need help housing and caring for those passengers. Throughout this service, we will hear from various people whose communities welcomed the Plain people. Please join me in welcoming Sheila Coates.
I can remember when I knew that the events of September 11th, 2001 were going to stick with me. I was in the town hall in Appleton well after midnight. We'd been asked to prepare for passengers from the aircraft being diverted from Gander. And I couldn't call it so much preparation as there wasn't even time to think it through. Bags of bedding started to trickle into the hall. Sandwiches and casseroles appeared. Pickup trucks were circling the streets, collecting food, water, towels, you name it. Items that had been gathered and left on the front steps and at the end of driveways in the early hours of September the 12th. I still get a lump in my throat when I think about how the residents mobilized as before the passengers had even arrived, there was a cozy sleeping area, tables, chairs, and a TV, and more kinds of goulash than I knew existed. I will always be so proud of what we did in those dark days and nights. I'm proud, too, that those same preparations were unfolding simultaneously in small towns all across Newfoundland. To me, there was only one thing more frightening and disturbing than watching the World Trade Center towers collapse, and that was to witness the passengers seeing it for the first time when they arrived. It was difficult to watch their expressions of horror and fear and their tears. Many of them were traveling alone, and some of them did not have English as a first, let alone second language. And now they were all under the hospitality of strangers. In Appleton, we had passengers from throughout Europe, from India, the Middle East, and of course the United States. Those who understood English were able to communicate their fears and their needs, but there were many others who struggled to do so. I approached one woman dressed head to toe in black, sitting and nervously thumbing her rosary beads. When I tried to indicate the food available to her, she just shrugged and cried. We all tried to make sure everyone felt safe and comfortable, with many passengers finding those things in our own homes. I had a family of 4 from Sweden staying at my house, graciously hosted by my then teenage daughter. Probably unthinkable today, or is it? The one passenger who will always be in my heart and thoughts I can only refer to as the man in the white shirt. He seemed to be alone and didn't understand my questions as to if there was anything he needed. One of my house guests spoke several European languages, and on speaking to him, she thought he might be Polish, but couldn't be sure. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered a man who had moved to Gander from Poland following the war. So I cold called him and hoped he might be able to help. Well, later that day, Mr. and Mrs. Manco found their way to me, bearing a bag full of toiletries, which she proceeded to pass out amongst the passengers, chatting away all the time. Mr. Manco came with me, and he greeted the man in the white shirt. The smile that came over that man's face is burned in my heart. They clasped hands and laughed together. Mr. Manco asked what I would like to say to the man, which was simply, was he okay? Did he need anything? Upon translation, the man in the white shirt looked at me, placed one hand on his heart, and took my hand in his other. He was okay, and he had everything that he needed. Thank you. Mr. Manco stayed quite a while, and before he left, he had found a few other Slavic speakers, and it was so humbling to look at them all, chatting together as friends, not strangers. Every time he saw me, the man in the white shirt waved and placed his hand on his heart. He showed interest in a chess set, which was making the rounds out on the deck by the hall. So I borrowed one for him, and he spent many hours playing wordlessly with his newfound companions. After a few days, our passengers were advised that they were to leave us. It was another dark night when they boarded the buses for Gander and then home. The weather echoed our heavy hearts as a pouring rain drummed the buses on their way. And there was the man in the white shirt in one of the bus windows with his hand on his heart. I wish I could remember his name. In the months and years that followed, many passengers reached out to our volunteers. We received postcards and letters, and one year, one of the passengers sent every one of us a Christmas card. Some returned for visits, yet not everyone had the proficiency in English to initiate communications with us, or the means to travel or return. It was though as they were swept into our lives to remind us how small the world can be, and then swept away. Many have been taken from us a second time. one passenger who buoyed the spirits of all those around her, particularly when she was acting chief bartender. She passed away a few years after her visit. I wonder about the couple from Israel. He was in the armed services. And also about the other passengers whose homes were countries where there were scenes of unrest. And then our own taken away. In the 20 years since 9/11, there are far fewer of our group of volunteers. Who is left to tell of them and that horrible but amazing time, if not us, if not me? There will never be another Fran, Anne, Dennis, or Jim. During those days, I learned many things. One being that a chess set is bound by no language, and that a little community, can welcome and comfort the world, and to never underestimate a gesture in lieu of words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Adam Janes, who's known to most everyone as Janer, was a little over a year old when 9/11 happened. For years, he's heard the stories from friends and from family about what they did to help stranded passengers in Gander and surrounding communities. And being the talented musician and songwriter he is, he wrote a song about it entitled "Come Back Home." Well, today, Janer will perform that song in public for the very first time.
Remember when everything had changed, and it's been long since it all went on, but I remember like it's yesterday. It's 11 a.m. and I know there's something strange. Turn the radio on, there's not a song. I can't believe what I heard it say. Although I might not know your name, and you might not know where you came, everybody here's the same, and it's a wide open door for 6,700 new faces, most not heading to the same places, landing 38 new planes and living here for 5 whole days. Something's different here and I see it. I'll keep you company when you need it, and you'll go back into the big, big world, but remember you can come back home. And ever since we were running in both directions, opposite of each other. And I know it's been a minute since you see me there. We were turning strangers to brothers and sisters that were living away. But I'll still call and check if you're okay, although I might just know your name, and you might know right where you came. Everybody here's the same, and this is your home for sure. To 6,700 new faces, most not heading to the same places, landing 38 new planes and living here for 5 whole days. Something's different here and I see it. I'll keep you company when you need it, and you'll go back into the big, big world, but remember you can come back home.
Thank you, Janer. What a remarkable tribute to our communities, and we thank you so much for sharing your song. Sang that for the very first time for us today. Isn't that incredible? That is just beautiful. And now I'm weepy, and I apologize for that. Born and raised in Newfoundland and Labrador, Premier Andrew Furey is a passionate orthopedic trauma surgeon and educator with Mayoral University School of Medicine. His strong work ethic has earned him many local, provincial, and national awards and honors, including Humanitarian of the Year by the Canadian Red Cross, and he is a recipient of the Governor-General of Canada's Meritorious Service Cross. Please join me in welcoming Premier Andrew Furey to bring remarks on behalf of the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, thank you, Tony Marie. I'm a little weepy myself. I think that's allowed today. But good afternoon, Your Honors, distinguished guests, and all of those who are watching across this province, the country, and our friends and families in the United States of America. Today we are gathered to mark a tragic and solemn occasion as we remember all those lives lost 20 years ago. We also send our sympathies to the families and loved ones left behind to mourn such an unimaginable loss. You often hear, you've heard it today, that the world changed on 9/11. But one thing that didn't, one thing in fact became even stronger, and that was the bond between the United States and Canada. On that beautiful, clear September morning, we were all New Yorkers. We were all attacked. Everything we believe in, love, and cherish was attacked. But we stood together then against an incomprehensible evil. We've stood together ever since. Because for Canada and the United States, we know that freedom and justice may be tested in the worst ways, as they were on that fateful day in 9/11. But together, we always make sure that we will never, ever be knocked down. In Newfoundland and Labrador, there is an unusual juxtaposition of emotions at this time of year. Of course, we all feel the individual emotions related to the tragedy, the uncertainty, and fear that was brought on by the attacks in the United States. But there is also a tremendous sense of pride that stems from what happened in the moments, hours, days, and years since 2001. Shortly after those heinous acts were carried out in the United States, something extraordinary began to happen here in Gander and the surrounding areas. The people of Gander and places like Appleton, Glenwood, and Benton saw a need. They saw a need and acted. Today, while we still try to come to grips with this tragedy, we also want to recognize the way people here responded to something that indeed changed our world. September the 11th, 2001, the day the world changed. I am sure everyone in this audience, watching and here today, knows exactly where they were and what they were doing in those fateful minutes and moments. My wife, Allison, an American, whose father was a first responder and whose mother a flight attendant, called out in our own house to come quickly. A plane had struck the World Trade Center. Moments later, a second strike. We knew that there was no mistaking that this was no accident. Our thoughts went immediately to the families of those in the towers and to the first responders. Within minutes, our gaze turned from our TV to the front window of our Airport Heights home in St. John's as we watched plane after plane after plane descend on our city. Dozens of diverted aircrafts turning into a place that many on board had never heard of. Of course, similar stories played out across Newfoundland and Labrador, and Gander was the center of it all, a center of hope for the world. We all know that story now. It's been told on stages around the world. What happened here in Gander and the surrounding communities in the days after 9/11 was really quite remarkable. It was emotional. It was spiritual. In its essence, it was human. It was indeed one of the world's darkest hours, but that bright light of a warm welcome, a comforting hug, a hot meal, and a place to lay your head let people know that they were safe, cared for, and not alone. In the shadows of the rubble and the steel, despite the darkness, real humanity shone a much-needed light. In time of such fear and uncertainty, those selfless acts of kindness reminded us that all was not bad. That kindness still existed, that the human spirit, that love and compassion would prevail. The friendships forged, the memories, the gratitude. What happened here was indeed unplanned, not done for recognition or for praise. It was just done with a heart and a half, just like Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have done for generations. Today, while we remember those who were lost and the loved ones they left behind, we also think of the kindness, the warmth, and generosity shown to strangers. I've always been proud to be a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, but it makes me especially proud to be a premier of a province where people step up when called upon, to look after their neighbors, to look after strangers, where they open their homes, open their families, and open their hearts to those in need. On behalf of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, I want to once again say a thank you to everyone who helped play a small or big or in-between role in the days after 9/11. 20 years later, your legacy continues to capture the human spirit and captivate the world. Thank you to those who spontaneously made thousands of strangers feel like family in a new home in a strange and unusual time. Thank you very much.
Of the 38 wide-body planes diverted to Gander that day, Continental 5 was one of them. Today, I am honored to introduce crew member Pam Henry to speak.
Good afternoon. It is a great honor for myself and my colleagues to be with you for the first time since 9/11. This is part of my Gander story, and it's written from my mother's point of view. It's a chapter published in God in the Rearview Mirror by LaVilla Henry. I have a message from your daughter, the lady on the phone stated. She wants me to tell you she is fine, and she is in Gander, Newfoundland. My eyes filled with tears as I spoke. Is there a number where I can reach her? Let me see if I can patch you through. It was my first indication I was speaking to an operator. After a couple of minutes, the phone line went dead and then rang again. It was the same lady. Let me try once more, she insisted. After the third attempt, I heard Pamela's voice come on the line. Through our sobs, we began to convey our messages to each other. It was September 11th, 2001. That morning, as I emerged from upstairs, Paul reported a plane just flew into one of the Twin Towers in New York. As I stood there, the unthinkable happened, and we both watched in disbelief as another plane exploded into the side of the second tower. Where's Pamela? Paul asked. She's coming home from London today, but I don't know which flight she's on. Shortly, Pamela's friend and fellow flight attendant called. She said she would check the schedule and find out Pamela's flight number and call us back, and she did. With the flight number in hand, Paul contacted his former coworkers at the Denver Air Traffic Control Center and asked if they would locate her airplane. The government had ordered all airplanes out of the sky, and we had no idea where Pamela would end up. I longed to hear her voice, and with the help of the kind-hearted and persistent Canadian cell phone operator, my prayer had been answered. Pamela explained that she was still on the airplane and wanted to be strong for the passengers, tried not to cry, though neither of us passed that test very well. Theirs was one of more than 35 jetliners carrying more than 6,000 passengers that had landed at the airport in Gander, nearly doubling their small population. Because of the circumstances, safety measures were extreme, and all passengers and crew were ordered to stay on board until the necessary security was in place. News for those on the airplane was sketchy, so we did our best to fill her in quickly on what we had heard. I was awakened at 2 a.m. The phone was ringing. My first thought was it was Pamela, and I was right. She, the rest of the crew, and the passengers were still on the plane. Most were sleeping. Earlier, a few had gotten a connection through the airplane phones. Since Pamela had nothing else to do, she sat and dialed our number over and over and over again. Finally, it rang. This time we had a chance for a longer conversation. Several aspects of her flight had been good, if there was such a thing. Her flight hadn't been full, so most people were able to find a place to stretch out and rest. The airplane had an adequate amount of water. The lavatories had not overflowed. I filled her in on what we had learned during the day. After being on the airplane for nearly 30 hours, it was finally their turn to disembark and go through customs. Pamela was suffering from a fever and was whisked away from her crew to medical personnel. Feeling alone and not knowing if she would be reunited with her colleagues, the kindness of her new hosts soon became apparent. Before long, she had been checked, given a prescription without cost, and was driven to the hotel where her crew was staying. I don't know who besides God was in charge of organizing what happened in Gander that week, but the people of the area followed the lead in a remarkable way. Though the school bus drivers had been on strike, they suspended their disagreement. The passengers of 38 airplanes were carried to local schools, fire stations, churches, and auditoriums in Gander and neighboring towns where makeshift beds were made available and meals were delivered, keeping their surprised guests fed. People opened their own homes to the elder, infirm, and mothers traveling alone with their infants. Per a request to the Red Cross, during their stay, Pamela and her fellow flight attendants were taken to the firehouse in Gambo to encourage their passengers. Finally, on September 15th, they were allowed to board their airplane and continue their flight to its original destination of Houston, Texas. As they prepared to take off for home, the flight attendants began to sing "God Bless America" over the PA, and all the passengers tearfully began to join in. On September 11, 2001, we didn't have to wonder if there was an evil enemy at work in this world or that there were those who would obey his commands. However, there were others who showed by their deeds the lesson of the Good Samaritan to near perfection. The citizens of Gander and the surrounding area were some of those very special people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and welcome home. Miami Country Day School is a private, non-denominational preschool to grade 12 college preparatory school in Miami-Dade County. The Upper School Theater program, under the direction of Christina Pla-Guzman, learned the story of Gander and surrounding area. And while preparing for this performance, the students were able to learn the story of compassion, empathy, and how something good can come out of something bad. We hope you enjoy this rendition of Come From Away's 38 Planes reprise, Somewhere in the Middle of Nowhere.
The winds start to pick up. 50-mile-an-hour winds. We're still on the ground. There's a hurricane coming, and I'm thinking, we're running out of time. We have to leave. We have to leave now.
One plane, then another, and then 9 planes, and another, and then 13 planes, and another, and another, 24, 29, 32, 38, 38, 30, 38, 38, 30, 38, 38, 30, 30, 30, 38 planes.
And gentlemen, if you look out your windows, underneath all that rain is Maine. We've just
talk to me, please.
And out the window we see
a place we all know below.
Is this thing on? Oh, it's on. Sorry, everyone. Hi. Like most everyone, I am sorry saying goodbye. So I wanted to thank them for all that they did. So I'm doing just that. And I'm passing a hat to the people who gave up their time and they gave up their town. So let's give them a scholarship. Pass the hat down, 'cause somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of who knows where you'll find something in the middle of something, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of clear blue air. You found your heart but left a part of you behind.
Nick and I sit together and I want to say something, but we're leaving and it's over and
then she's crying and I don't know what to do, so I put my arm around her and I kiss her on the forehead, to comfort her.
well, there was some turbulence and honestly, I just thought he missed. So
Ladies and gentlemen, if you look out your windows, you won't want to miss this. We just entered Texas.
what'd you do? But mostly, Nick and I spend the plane ride home canoodling in the back.
And at one point, a flight attendant comes around saying,
hot towel, cold towel?
Somewhere in between the piece of life and working where you're going, something makes you stop and notice, and you're finally in the moment. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of who knows where you'll find something nowhere, clear blue air. You found your heart but left a part of you behind.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your seat back and tray tables up. Right below us is the city where I grew up. Coming round past the field as the wheels touch the track. Taxi and we're all cheering, we're down, thanking everyone. Thank you for flying American. Hugging the mug in the room 'cause we're home again. Past the gate of the stairs and we're there, and he's waiting in line. Though I'm fine, Tom. I'm fine.
Hello, I am Jean Chrétien. I'm in my home in Shawinigan, and I'm happy to talk to the people of Gander. On the 11th of September, 20 years ago, it was a very important day for United States, Canada, and the world. But there is one group of people who have done what was unbelievable. It's you, the people of Gander, and the other people of Labrador, when, as government, myself and the Minister of Transport authorized the plane who could not land in the United States to land in Newfoundland, and especially in Gander. And when I think about that, cannot be prouder to be a Canadian because of the way you behave. I was in New York with the mayor of Gander some years ago, and to see the big play that illustrate what you've done on the Broadway. And I remember turning around and looking at the crowd when people were applauding. They had smile because the play was so good. They had tears in their eyes because of the emotion they felt vis-a-vis what you've done in Gander. So for me, it is one of great moments of my political life, and I'm happy to share this great reminiscence with you, my friends from Gander. Ça me fait plaisir d'être avec vous ce soir parce que ce rendez-vous que les Américains ont eu involontairement à Gander est quelque chose de mémorable. Vous avez ouvert vos maisons et vos cœurs à ces Américains qui ne pouvaient pas retourner vers l'Europe, qui ne pouvaient pas atterrir chez eux et qui ont été reçus à bras ouverts par vous à Gander et à autres places dans la province de Terre-Neuve. Comme premier ministre et comme gouvernement, sur la recommandation de mon ministre des Transports, nous avions ouvert nos espaces aériens pour les Américains, pour atterrir les avions américains qui étaient au-dessus de l'Atlantique et ne pouvaient pas retourner. Et quand j'étais à New York pour le fameux spectacle de Broadway sur cet événement-là, j'étais là à l'ouverture la première présentation accompagnée du maire et du premier ministre du Canada, M. Trudeau. Et quand je me suis retourné, les spectateurs américains avaient les larmes aux yeux parce qu'ils savaient que vous aviez ouvert et vos maisons et votre cœur à ces gens en détresse. J'étais très fier d'être Canadien et c'est vous qui m'en avez donné l'occasion. Encore une fois, mille merci.
Ash to ash and dust to
Thank you so much to the Gander Community Choir for such a wonderful rendition of a song that was written by Newfoundland's very own musical trio, the Ennis Sisters. As part of our reflections today, I am happy to welcome Major Ron Stuckless to the stage. Sir?
Good evening. I'll start by saying to you that I have no stories to tell because my job was to keep the wheels turning, and that was a lot of fun. For me, the day started as usual, up in the morning, breakfast, no TV turned on, 8 o'clock out the door, ready for the office. And no TV at the office and no radios at the office. We were absolutely not in the know at all of what was happening on 9/11. There was a birthday girl in the crew, and so they were taking her to Jungle Gyms. And I was to meet my dad, and I can't really remember. I have sat and thought for a while, a number of times, but I was supposed to meet my dad for lunch. And so when the crew went to Jungle Gyms, I drove home, and he is stopped by the driveway. He's not in the driveway in his pickup, and I thought, what's he doing? So I went quickly to the door of his truck, and by that time he had the window down, and he said, "Do you know what's happening today?" And I said, "No, I don't, but you're going to tell me." He said, "Well, I don't really know, and I really don't understand it." But he said, "It's all about big planes going into big buildings in New York." Well, quickly, let's go in and turn on the TV and have a look and see what's happening. And when we switched on the TV, you know the first picture, don't you? That big plane into the tower. And I sat there for about 5 minutes, and I'm thinking, this is war. And if it's war, guess what? Airplanes are involved, and that means that Gander will be involved. So I said to my dad, "You can stay here and watch TV as long as you want. I have to run." So I took off to Jungle Gyms to see the crew and to say to the boss, "We don't really know what's happening, but there was a TV on, but it was muted." And I said to him, "I want to tell you what you see there muted is really happening. So you guys need to get yourself out of here, get yourself back to the office, because we're in for a run." Well, from there I left, and I'm thinking I'll go to the town office and see what's happening over there. And I went in, opened the door, went in, and there's a little lady sitting there to a table right underneath the stairwell, going up to the command post. And I sat there for a moment, and Claude came out and he said, "Come with me." And it wasn't very long up there before I began to understand the intensity of what was happening, because already these fellows were well into bringing in aircraft. But when I got there and sat around the table with them, I realized that they were starting to talk about deplaning and registration. And we listened for a while. I didn't say much. And I'm hearing something like registration should be starting at 5. So at 3 o'clock, Dave Dillon, Red Cross, and myself, we were told that we need to get out and to find out a place where we're going to do the registration. Now, the suggestion was the center or the terminal. And we decided that the terminal would be the place to really, because it would cut down on a number of things, especially the busing. So that would mean that we'd had to get permission from upstairs in the terminal, and that came, and we were getting ourselves now ready for registration, and it was about 5 o'clock, they were telling us, that the first planes would be deplaning. And so we got to find tables, and we got to find a number of things, and we got to have volunteers. I call back to the office, and I say to the boss, I need 40 volunteers for 5 o'clock and make sure they're in uniform. And by 5 o'clock, I was seeing these volunteers finally finding their way to the airport. Get the word in a moment. Well, it was much later than 5 when we were getting the first plane off. It was more like 8, maybe 9 at the evening. And Dave had the registration group already, and they're all sitting around tables, and we're waiting. And I'm thinking, 36 planes, 6,000 people. I don't think we will have them registered very quickly. So I called back to the boss and said, you know what? I'm going to need the second shift of people for registration. And I need, again, uniforms. So I just left it at that, and he went to work at that for me. And I tell you, it was quite a night. And the next morning, doing that kind of thing. Well, we were there, we were at these things, getting things ready, and the registrations were going through, and the evening was moving on, and eventually I get a call. One of the calls that comes. It was coming from the Gander Corps, and they were saying, we need you, we need you badly, we have a problem. We have a bus full of people outside our church, and guess what? The hall is full of donations that are coming. There's bedding, and there's food, and there's anything that you could think of that will be needed. Well, what are we going to do now? So I quickly went back to our command post, the office, and said to Major Richardson, we have a big problem. We have a building over there full of all kinds of donations, and we also got 40 people that got to sleep over there. So he said, well, what are we going to do? I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not sure what you're going to do, but I'm going next door to the community center, and I'm going to tell Kevin that we're going to take him over. What do you say? And he smiled at me again. I'm not sure what that smile was supposed to mean, but anyway, I came in here, and Kevin was here, and I said, Kevin, I'm coming to take you over. What do you mean? I said, we have a lot of things next door that's got to come over here because we got people over there and then they need the space. Oh, you can't have this place. I said, why not? And he said, because we got a hockey tournament here on the weekend. I said, I have news for you, sir. We're in a bit of a disaster, so you better get the planks and the boards in on this ice because we're going to fill it full. And before very long, the trucks are coming. They're already loading over there next door. And within the half an hour, you're going to need to have things ready. Well, things were moving and moving quickly. And we set up, and we had a Major Terry Hopkins, who I asked to be the coordinator of the things that were happening here, and he did that for me. Now, when we got in here, all along that back wall down there are all kinds of showers. And we had people coming and wanting showers. And it was great. We had all those places. But they said, we need some clothes. We're going to need clothes. And the thing that they were saying mostly, if we had underwear and socks, we'd be fine. No problem. So I went upstairs to Kelly and I said, Kelly, go over to Walmart, and whatever Walmart will give you in underwear and socks, bring it over to me. And she came with her little Ranger pickup, loaded with male and female underwear and socks. And you talk about happy people coming to the showers. It was all happening so fast. And the decisions that had to be made, like you didn't quite know where to turn on occasions. We were buying most of our food stuff from Co-op because they had a supply depot here. And it was about midweek when Morley called Thierry, and Thierry called me, and I came over. And Morley was saying, Ron, we have completely run out of vegetables. And he wasn't talking about turnip and carrots. We had lots of those, but only Newfoundlanders eat these. They wanted green vegetables and all kinds of things because the diets that we were working with was just unbelievable. We even had to find kosher food because we had a couple of rabbis that we had to look after. Morley said, we're running out. I said, what are we going to do, Morley? Not sure, I can't find any. Well, I said, I tell you what, go back, call Marine Atlantic, and see if there's any trucks on the other side that would have fruit and vegetables aboard. And Morley went away and came back very quickly and said, yes, there are 2 trucks over there. And I said, you asked them to put them on the vessel right up front, didn't you, so that we would get it? And he said, that's exactly what's going to happen. Those trucks are going to be on the front of the vessel. So the next day, fairly quickly, we had lots of fruit and vegetables. Problems all the time. I was carrying home in my pocket tons of paper. Corner Brook would have been really proud of me. I was picking up stuff all the time. And I went back to the office, and my assistant and our IT person, I said to them, please go to work and put together some kind of an accounting thing on the computer so that you know where these pieces of paper are coming from, and we have an idea of where we are with what we're spending, and get it so that it makes some sense for us. And they did that and began to put that together. In the meantime, I am thinking, as I'm working, that I now have the working capital of almost every small business in this town. And eventually they're not going to have anything to give me because they'll have no money to buy it. So I have to do something. Goes back to the boss again and said, you know what, we have to have an advance from our head office in Toronto. And he smiled at me. And I said, who's going to make the call, you or me? He said, it's not going to be me. I made my call, and my counterpart in Toronto, I think he was expecting me actually, Newfoundland roots, and I said, Paul, I'm going to need some money. I'm going to need substantial money. He said, how much you looking for? I only asking for $300,000. That's all. And he said to me, in 3 hours, your people can start writing checks. And that was happening. But you know, once I got that out of the way, I went back to the command post again. And when I walked in the command post and Turner and his crew, guess what they were talking about? They were talking about money. And they couldn't get none from the federals, and they couldn't get none from the provincials, and they didn't have it. And I smiled and I said, Turner, it's all right. I just got a substantial draft that I can use for this period of time. Folks, at the end of the day, when social services came to pick up my homemade accounting thing that the office put together for me, that we had spent $289,000 and change, thanks to the Salvation Army Red Shield appeal, that they had the funds that they could get to us. Well, that looked after that. And Sunday, the last plane went. And there's still a lot of work to be done, folks. And I did not have what it took to start calling Gander or anywhere close by. We still had schools that had to be cleaned and sanitized before kids could go back into them. And Major Joyce and the office got on the phone and started looking for volunteers. Monday and Tuesday, Monday morning, we had school buses rolled in here from Deer Lake, Green Bay, to help us. And by Tuesday afternoon, we had the final inspection that we needed, presented it to the school board, and Joyce and I could go home and go to bed.
Thank you. Here once again, please welcome the Gander Community Choir.
I'll be your bridge or troubled water. When you're down, I will carry you like a bridge or troubled water. I will lay me down. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, my Lord, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part. Oh, when darkness comes, and pain is all, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. I'll be your bridge or troubled water. When you're down, I will carry you like a bridge or troubled water. I will lay me down. Sail on, silver girl. Sail on, silver girl. Sail on by. Sail on by. Your time has come.
On a sunny September morning in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., Americans going about their lives were met with unimaginable horror. The years that have followed have seen justice delivered to evil men in battles fought in distant lands. But on this somber anniversary, our thoughts return to September the 11th, 2001. We remember the lives that were stolen, and we continue to pray for their families and friends. Despite the tragedy of that day, we also witnessed something distinctly American. Ordinary people rising to the occasion with countless acts of heroism and compassion. After 20 years, the memories of 9/11 have started to fade. But our duty to honor the victims and remember the lessons of that day does not fade with time. We should never forget the sacrifices of so many and the unity provided by a love of country and a desire for freedom. Thank you for remembering. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
For centuries, Canada and the United States have shared a unique bond. In February 2021, President Biden said this of our relationship: "The United States has no closer and no more important friend than Canada. Our nations share a close geography and history that will forever bind us together, but our values are even more consequential." It is my privilege to invite Deputy Chief of Mission Catherine Brucker to bring remarks on behalf of the United States.
Thank you, Tony Marie. Thank you, Mayor Farwell and the town of Gander. I would also like to extend greetings to our distinguished guests and to everybody in the audience. I'm honored and humbled to be here today as the representative of the U.S. government to commemorate September 11th and what Gander and the surrounding community did during those 5 days in September 2001. Memories of September 11th will always be overshadowed by the sheer horror of the day, though we were also comforted and inspired by countless acts of individual and collective heroism. Amid all this, however, there was one indisputable good news story. On that Tuesday, 20 years ago, Atlantic Canada showed the best of humanity on a day when we all needed to be reminded of fundamental goodness. Canada is our closest friend. Of this, there is no question. At our times of greatest need, you are always there. Whether extracting U.S. diplomats from Tehran in the celebrated 1980 Canadian caper, or opening your airspace, your homes, and your hearts to thousands of anxious Americans on flights diverted here on September 11th, 2001, you show us how lucky we are to have you as a neighbor. When you learned that thousands of people were descending on your town, you welcomed them. You came to the aid of men and women and children who were worried and confused and had nowhere to sleep. You opened your homes, your schools, and your churches to strangers. You brought them food and bedding. You arranged for calls to their loved ones, and you asked for nothing in return. One could say that it was the natural thing to do. After all, what were the options? Or, as modest Ganderites would say, it was nothing. But to passengers on 38 flights landing in Gander, 40 in Halifax, 33 in Vancouver, and dozens more across Canada, it was everything, and it was everything when they needed it most. I recently learned from then Minister of Transport David Collinette some of what went on behind the scenes. 250 inbound flights told to make U-turns. 224 or more passed the point of return but with unknown passengers. If terrorists were aboard, they could wreak havoc on North America. Within minutes, it was decided to direct many of these to Atlantic Canada. The rest, of course, is history. Despite the goals of the terrorists that day, September 11th has become a day that unites us. We all have a story to tell. I was posted in Vienna on September 11th at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe with its then 54 participating states. It was already late afternoon when I heard the report of a plane hitting the World Trade Center, and I figured it was one of the very small planes that often buzz around the city. We soon learned otherwise, and like people everywhere, we watched it all unfold on live TV. As an American, I felt deeply this attack against my country, but I was heartened in the coming days to hear how much colleagues from every corner of the world saw this as an attack against them too. At least 77 countries lost citizens in the attacks, but this was also a vicious assault on the values that underpin our societies. This was made very clear by NATO's action on September 12th to invoke Article 5, the only time in the alliance's history, affirming that an attack against one is an attack against all. And it's rather ironic to think that the United States' involvement in NATO when the organization was created at the end of the Second World War was really to anchor peace in Europe, and the only time that NATO had to invoke Article 5 was actually to come to the aid of the United States. While my own story is not dramatic, we all remember where we were on September 11th, and it is through our stories that we come together. For many people who landed in Gander that day, their 9/11 story includes not only fear and sorrow, but also hope and friendship. Lifelong friendships that were built right here in Gander. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "An important part of honoring victims of terrorism is working to prevent further terrorist attacks." Today, Canadian diplomats, aid workers, and military members continue to work with their U.S. counterparts around the world to combat terrorism and, even more importantly in my view, to address conditions that extremists can exploit. And here at home, the United States and Canada work together every day through NORAD to keep North America safe and secure. As the years tick by, I know the people of Gander will never stop saying what they did 20 years ago was nothing, and we will never stop saying thank you. You recently quoted what President Biden said earlier in this year. I'd also like to recall a quote from President Barack Obama, "The world needs more Canada." On behalf of the American government and the American people, I am proud to be here today to say thank you.
Lewisport was one of the many communities that opened its doors and hearts to over 800 stranded passengers on 9/11. Bill Hooper was mayor at that time, and he's here to reflect on his community's response.
Thank you, Tony Marie. 9/11, 20 years ago. I know exactly where I was. I was at work when a salesman came in and asked me if I knew what was going on in New York. I didn't have a clue, but a few minutes after I did, I immediately went home, watched TV, and I realized what was going on. And as mayor of the town of Lewisport, the next morning, we had 773 people in Lewisport. You must realize that Lewisport only have a population of 3,000 people. We're going to have an extra 1,000. So we had to put plans in place very, very fast, which we did. We called on the organizations, and after a little while, the next morning, we had accommodations already, and the passengers was arriving. And I'll just say that some of those passengers didn't have a clue where they were to. And the first thing they asked if we had cell service and a TV. And after a while, they all settled in, and the look on their face when they watched TV for the very first time, they realized what was going on in their own country. Now, it was a very sad affair that we had all those passengers in, and what happened in the U.S. was very sad. But having said that, the passengers came as, surrounding passengers came in as strangers, but I'm sure they left as friends. And I realized that we're running a bit behind, and I'll cut my remarks shorter. But there's a couple of stories I would like to share with you this evening that came out of the stranded passengers. We had a passenger from Columbus, Ohio, that visited our town, and she went on her way back. She decided that she was going to repay the residents and surrounding area of Lewisport with some with a scholarship she had formed. So she went back, and she's been back to Lewisport on 30 times to visit us in Lewisport. And I might add that she's here with us today. Excuse me. Shirley Brooks Jones. Right now, she's have awarded, I think, 300 plus scholarships. And today, that fund stands at $1.5 million. So my point is that it was not all sadness came out of town where we had stranded passengers. Now the people in Lewisport and the surrounding areas didn't do this to be repaid, but not only the scholarship, but Lewisport had many, I guess, donations and things did for the town and the area. I have a story that those passengers left very, I guess, happy. I happened to visit some of the venues where the passengers were staying, and I asked them how they were making out, and they were fine. And he said to me, where can you go, he said, and sit on the steps of a church right across from our RCMP station and smoke a cigar and have a drink of wine. So I will close on my remarks with saying thank you for the invitation to attend your function today, and I'm honored to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hooper. Sean Wiseman is a professional Newfoundland musician who often performs with his brother in the well-known band, the Wiseman Brothers, no relation. Along with being a music teacher, Sean is also a well-known performer and singer-songwriter on the Newfoundland and Labrador music scene. He's been doing this for over 30 years. Today he is here to perform a song entitled Remember the Day.
Thank you, Donnie. Remember the day, the first signs of trouble, the dust and the rubble, unspeakable loss. Remember the day, the courage and valor that ran to the towers at such a great cost. And remember the day and how we were shaken and our hearts awakened to what matters most. And remember the day. Remember how we've been changed. And remember the day as we carry on. day, the flags that were waving, the president saying what we needed to hear. And remember the day, the flood of compassion that washed through the nation as the smoke slowly cleared. And remember the day that brought us together and showed us the power that we have when we're one. And remember the day. Remember how we've been changed. And remember the day as we carry on. Carry on. Carry on. Remember the day, the scarred and the broken, the words left unspoken, the songs left unsung. And remember to pray for comfort and healing, for wisdom and leading till our journey is done. And remember the day and how we've been shaken and our hearts awakened to what matters most. And remember the day. Remember how we've been changed. And remember the day as we carry on. Carry on. Carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I am honored now to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Lydia Evaco, Wing Commander, 9 Wing Gander, to say a few words on behalf of first responders.
Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to be here on behalf of 9 Wing Gander and the Canadian Armed Forces as we commemorate the tragic event of September 11, 2001. Pour ceux d'entre nous assez vieux pour s'en souvenir, nous n'oublierons jamais où nous étions et ce que nous faisions cette journée-là, il y a déjà 20 ans. As did the rest of the world, we watched in horror as events unfolded in New York City, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day, including 24 Canadians and over 400 first responders. Thousands more were injured, and the lives of millions would be changed forever. While the scale of the tragedy will never be forgotten, neither will the extraordinary response from people around the world, and famously here in Gander. As did the rest of the community, 9 Wing contributed as best as it could to help the tired, the confused, the frightened guests that had just arrived at our doorstep. Without hesitation, all of our resources were pulled together to help with security, transportation, telecommunication, as well as accommodation, food, toys, anything the passengers would need. Our personnel donated clothing and the other necessities, took people into their home, and did their best to make them comfortable as we faced a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Un de nos hélicoptères de recherche et sauvetage, un CH-113 Labrador, revenait même d'une mission d'évacuation médicale en mer ce jour-là, lorsque l'équipage a pris la photo, maintenant fameuse, d'avions alignés à l'aéroport. Cette photo capture la nature sans précédent des événements de cette journée. Gander's response to those events was one of Canada's finest moments, providing help to our friends who needed the most. This response was a spontaneous act of humanity, one which truly illustrated the power of many in the face of tragedy. Thank you. Merci.
On the 15th anniversary of 9/11, a group of 12 Americans visited Gander on a tour of gratitude. They were all docents at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and some of them were also from the 9/11 Tribute Museum. Today, Jeanette Gutierrez, who is a volunteer with both organizations and a 9/11 survivor, is joining us. So please give Jeanette a warm Newfoundland and Labrador welcome.
So everybody keeps saying, 20 years, this is 20th anniversary, but for me, it's every day. It's no different this year than it was last year or the year before that or the year before that. Mainly because that morning, I was sitting at my desk, and at 8:46, I heard the first plane hit. I didn't know what it was, and much like everybody else in New York, we didn't know what was going on. If I tell my whole 9/11 story, I'll be up here a really long time. So instead, I'm going to skip straight to the fact that my older sister insisted that I get out of my office to leave, and I am thankful that I listened to her. She saved my life that day, not only by advising me to get out, but by insisting. And because I'm thick-headed, I kept saying no. And she said, well, I'll come to you. We'll leave together. And she came towards what everybody else was running away from. And for that, I am truly grateful. I think about all the people today that are in New York around the different memorials, and I know they're wondering, what would it have been like if my loved one lived, or if 9/11 didn't happen. I think the same thing, but I think if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be here. And when I arrived on the 15th anniversary, that's the day my 9/11 story changed completely. It grew into this amazing story of meeting this community, a community of human beings that call this place home, so far from my home. And I admit I was a bit taken aback by what I thought was uncontrollable kindness. Don't get me wrong, I think I'm a kind person. I'm kind, but I'm cautious. And you guys take kindness to another level. After being screeched in and kissing that awful fish, I went home to New York with such an amazing feeling of having just left home. Like, this felt like home. A place where I was safe and loved, and I knew I would be back. And I was back. I came back, this is my 4th trip. And it's not my last, that's for sure. All the things that I got to experience because my sister got me out, the birthdays, the vacations, I got to actually see my mom move to heaven and be there with my family. And I got to build a friendship with Kelly that I would have never had if my sister didn't do what she did. And when I tell my story in Newfoundland, people are like, there's not people like that out there. And I'm like, well, yes, there are. I promise you there are. And my 9/11 story it stretches to far boundaries when I bring in what I've experienced here. It's not just about that day or that month that followed or even the years that followed. It's about what's coming. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. I am a 9/11 survivor, and not by any fault of my own. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the right person. Do I have survivor's guilt? Yes, I do. So many mothers were killed that morning, and so many children grew up without their moms. I don't have children, I'm not a mother. And I always wondered, why me? Why did I make it? You know, I don't know. I try every day to be that person that those mothers in heaven can be proud of. I'm not sure why God led me here, but I'm so happy He did. I am a better person for having met you all. Thank you for shining such a bright light onto my darkest day. I am a very, very proud American, a very proud New Yorker, and I am an equally proud honorary Newfoundlander. Thank you.
Evangel Pentecostal Church was one of the many churches who took passengers in during those 5 days in September. Please welcome Pastor Mike Freak to the stage to bring a message of inspiration to us all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Tony Marie. Well, a number of months ago, I opened up my cell phone, and on my news feed, there was a title that caught my attention. And it was back when vaccinations were beginning to ramp up. And the title of the article was A Dose of Hope. And it said that we may get the vaccine sooner than we think. Now, back in those days, knowing that we were going to get the vaccination sooner, that was a dose of hope. And that's what I want to do today. I want to take just a couple of minutes to give you a little shot of hope, a little dose of hope. Is that okay? I want to illustrate it this way. In my backyard, I have a number of beautiful trees, and one in particular is what we call a snowball tree. You know, the kind that has these nice, beautiful white flowers, and when they bloom, they look like large snowballs. Well, 2 years ago, it got overrun and got infested with bugs, and the flowers on the tree, they all died, and the leaves fell off, the tree dried up, turned brown, and by all appearances, to me, it looked like the tree was dead. So I went to the shed, I took out my saw, and I went and I cut it down, and so that was 2 years ago. Now this spring, I went into the backyard, and I noticed some things starting to grow, and some things began to happen. Little shoots began to sprout up, and it actually started to grow again. And this year, some snowballs began to grow again. And little did I know that there was actually hope for that tree. Is there anyone here that can relate to that tree? Have you ever felt like that? Have you looked at your life, looked at the world, and it just seems so broken, it seems so shattered, and the world just seems so hopeless? And you thought, this is not the way my life should be, or this is not the way that the world should be, and maybe you've asked yourself this question: is there any hope for the world? Well, there was a man named Job in the Bible who compared his life to a tree, and let me tell you a little bit about him. He had lost his health, lost his children, lost his home, lost his animals, lost his wealth. He lost everything, and everything was going wrong, and everything appeared to be hopeless. And his wife said to him, Job, seriously, why not just curse God and die? In other words, she was telling him, Job, cut down the tree. Just forget about it. And here's what Job said. Job said, at least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new roots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil. Yet, it says this, at the scent of water it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. Yet at the scent of water. I love that statement, because that statement reminds me that no matter how bad things appear to be, there's always hope. And I want to tell you today, I smell hope. Now, when was the last time you walked into a stadium and you could say that? When was the last time you walked into a stadium and thought, man, this stadium smells good? Probably never. But I want to tell you today that in this stadium, there is a scent of hope, and I smell hope today. You see, at some point in our lives, we're all going to go through deep pain and loss, and we all come to points in our lives when life really hurts. And I'm not talking about little bumps in the road. I'm not talking about things like, I can't find my keys today, or the Montreal Canadiens are down 3 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. I'm not talking about those sorts of things. I'm talking about earth-shattering potholes of life that can feel like they're going to swallow us alive. Things that happen in our lives that make us feel like we just can't breathe, like things that rock your faith in God and rock your faith in humanity, those sorts of things. And we feel at times that we feel like that tree broken, stripped away, and we're walking through what the Bible describes as the valley of the shadow of death, and nothing seems to make sense at all. 9/11 was without doubt one of those moments. And I remember sitting in my living room that day, glued to the television in disbelief of what was happening. Like, what's happening to the world? How could something like this happen? And it felt like that day, like hope had been pulled out from under us. And the planes began to come, and plane after plane began to land, and thousands of confused passengers, scared people landed here in Gander. I can't imagine what it was like for those passengers who had been sitting on those planes for hours on end, not knowing what was happening. And when those doors finally opened, those passengers didn't just smell the amazing fresh saltwater air of Newfoundland and Labrador. When those passengers stepped off those planes and walked down those steps, those 6,700 passengers, for the very first time that day, smelled hope. And as they met the local residents, they didn't just smell home-cooked meals, they smelled hope. They weren't just greeted with a hug, they were greeted with hope. They weren't just offered a warm bed to sleep in, they were offered hope. And as the community of Gander and the surrounding area came together and did their part, the aroma of hope filled stadiums and schools and homes and churches and businesses. And 20 years later, the aroma of hope is still here, and it has spread around the world because you did what Philippians 2:3 tells us to do. And it says this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. And that's exactly what you did. And let me tell you today, if there's hope for a tree, there's hope for you. And there's hope for our community. And there's hope for our world. And I want to end with this final verse from Romans 15:13. It says this: may God, the source of hope, fill you with joy and peace through your faith in him. Now I know we're in an election year, so I want to be very careful about the thing that I'm about to say next. But true hope is not based on who we put in office. Hope is based on who was put on the cross. In other words, hope is found on a tree. Hope is real because hope has a name. And that is the message of Christianity, and that is the message of the gospel. So let me conclude with that verse once again. May God, the source of hope, fill you with all joy and peace through your faith in him. Amen. God bless you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Tis grace has led us safe thus far, and grace will guide us home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see.
Thank you very much to George Maswal for that beautiful performance of Amazing Grace. And for those of you who don't know, George plays Mayor Claude Elliott and other mayors in the Toronto production of Come From Away. And about 5 years ago, George also fell in love with Newfoundland and Labrador, and he now lives here. A commemoration of this magnitude does not happen without the work of many hands, and we would like to thank many of them. NTV and Rogers TV for agreeing to broadcast this service for those who could not attend. Those who participated today, the choir, our special guests, performers, and reflections speakers. Come From Away for generously sponsoring this service. The 9/11 Committee for their ideas, guidance, and participation in numerous meetings. Adventure Central for helping with media, and the list goes on and on. Thank you all so much for being here and for joining us on this very special occasion. Thank you to Gander and surrounding communities for all you've done, for making our province and our country ever grateful and very, very proud. We ask now that you please rise for the march off of flags, the march off first responders, and then the departure of their honors. Thank you.